We're really excited to have everyone join us today. We are going to be doing the webinar Building Resilience in Your Children with Dyslexia and Other Learning Disabilities. And Michael Hart is our presenter. Dr. Michael Hart is a child psychologist, 25 years of experience in parent and teacher training, educational technology, learning differences, and diagnostic assessment of dyslexia and attention problems. He is the founder of www.drmichaelhart.com and currently provides webinars and courses regarding the proper educational care of our dyslexic students. Michael, we're so glad to have you here with us today, and we really look forward to what you have to share with us. So let's go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, thanks to everyone at Learning Ally for this opportunity. I think it'll be a fun hour. So I'd like to start by talking about our roadmap today. And we're going to be covering a lot of content, so I want to get started with you. So we're going to begin by describing what resilience means. But we're going to add to that because in terms of having dyslexia or having a chronic learning issue, resilience kind of takes on a whole nother flavor or a whole nother tone. So we're going to talk about resilience within that context. Then we're going to review signs that you need to keep a lookout for, because when you see these signs, we're going to talk about how you're going to need to intervene. And these are issues that come up for most of us at some point in our lives, and so we got to be very sensitive and understand the most effective way to move in and take care of it. So we'll do that. And then we're going to spend some time with some very practical tips that will help you help your child build resilience. And we'll spend quite a bit of time with that, and we'll review a number of topics that you can really kind of spend the rest of your life working on, quite frankly. Now, I get a lot of questions from parents about, you know, I have this super difficult child. The child's been difficult since they were born. You know, what kind of tips do I have for kind of engaging my really difficult child? Because it's like, I'm not quite sure where to start. So I'm going to spend some time describing what that difficult child or what that difficult temperament might look like in relationship to their neurobiology, and then talk about some tips to deal and find ways to re-engage, so to speak, with your child. Now, finally, I think it only makes sense for us to spend a few minutes talking about how we can take what we're doing at home and make sure that our cohorts at the school are implementing the same kinds of plans and they're consistent with what we're doing at home. And that's a delicate dance, but we're going to talk about it and frame it in a way that I think will improve your chances of being most successful across the board. So what do we mean by resilience? So in the really traditional form, you know, the really specific definitions, the resilience is, you know, this person's ability to recover quickly from unfortunate circumstances, or their ability to adapt when something really stressful happens or they have a really traumatic event. Now, some people talk about how, you know, some people are just born that way. Some people are, you know, able to kind of just do that on their own. But we believe strongly that definitely we're going to be able to also help build this anyway. But the idea here, though, is that oftentimes we're talking about a singular or maybe a couple of different events that were really stressful or were very tough. And in the case of dyslexia or in the case of other learning issues, we're really talking about a chronic path where dyslexia doesn't go away, as we know, and there are considerable challenges at various times in your life, particularly when you're in the school years. And so the whole idea is that we've got to be more effective with resilience over time as opposed to just a single event. Now, I was doing my research, and I thought maybe maybe what we call an emotional definition would be what I found in Merriam-Webster, and that is that, and I think our kids feel this way sometimes, the ability of something to return to its original shape after it's been pulled and stretched and pressed and bent And I really do feel like that's kind of on an emotional level. That's really more consistent with how our kids oftentimes feel after they've been through a tough day or a tough week or whatever it is. So I talk about it in terms of the dyslexic experience. And I just love this picture because I just think it so perfectly represents how you can feel if, well, first of all, if the child's not getting their proper care, or the parent is really struggling with trying to figure out what to do next, or even the teacher who may have very limited resources in their effort to try their best to help the child. It just can be really overwhelming. So I just loved this picture, and I thought I'd share it with you. Now, I want to explain the 7 by 5 by 9 because I think this is a super critical thing to keep in mind at all times. Many of you out there obviously living it every day. But the way I describe it to people who don't understand or new to this, I say, look, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 9 months out of the year, far too many of our kids are being bombarded with these messages that they're not okay, that there's something wrong with them, to the point where, you know, they're stupid or they're lazy, they just need to work harder. And they're just, you know, they're just already, as little kids, starting school, they're failures. Now, that is brutal because as young children, you know, they have, you know, the development of some social and emotional skills relevant to how old they are, but to cope with that kind of tension and pressure and constant battering, that really is a function of the context, which is what I call a mismatch between how their brain is wired and their learning style and the school program. So it behooves us as adults to recognize that and take responsibility for this is our problem, not the kids' problem. We're the ones that need to figure out how to reduce that mismatch. So what I find interesting is I do interviews on my site, podcast interviews with a lot of very successful dyslexic adults. And it's fascinating because they come from all walks of life, but they all talk about school as this terrifying, hostile place. So instead of having this really wonderful experience where they're challenged and they have to learn and they have to do all kinds of things, but it's supposed to be a safe, exciting place. It ends up being a terrifying, hostile place in which they need to be 9 months out of the year. So it's no surprise, it's no big leap to appreciate that there is this chronic risk. You know, you're being told that you're not good enough, so you could easily become feeling deeply ashamed, deeply inadequate, confused, and really truly helpless. So we as adults have to organize around our kids in a way that mitigates that and manages that more effectively. So we do need to be on the lookout at all the time in terms of when the child has kind of stepped over the line in certain types of social and emotional issues. I talk about mood changes and those feelings of sadness, the withdrawal, and the mood swings. Now, everybody feels that way at times. I'm talking about intensity and frequency. I'm talking about where it really impedes their ability to function normally at home or in the school. And, you know, notwithstanding some kind of a medical issue, that's just not normal, okay? That's not okay for us, and that is a red line in this. That's a red line. We need to stop it. So mood changes, intense feelings. When you got kids coming home, they're so worried they're getting headaches, they're getting stomach aches, they're crying on Sunday nights when they got to go back to school the next day. I mean, that's a red flag, and we need to deal with it. We need to move in. And you know, I describe it this way. It's like when you found out that your child had some kind of a learning problem, we all know now that the rule is early intervention, don't wait, and be aggressive. And there's absolutely no difference between that and when we see these kinds of emotional impacts on our kids. Now, the first two, mood changes and intense feelings, kind of lean towards the internalized issue where Kids kind of internalize the stress that they're feeling. On the other end of the spectrum are the kids who begin to act out verbally in a physically aggressive way, verbally and physically with aggression. Now, obviously, since the first day of preschool, kicking, biting, hitting is out of the question. So again, that is just their way of saying, hey, I'm in a lot of pain and I need help. And it's scary and it's intimidating and it's hurtful, but you got to remember that they're just expressing what they're feeling inside because of the stress they're under. Now, the next one is a little bit trickier because there's a lot of different reasons why kids have difficulty with concentration. So this takes time to parse out. But one of the things I suggest is that if you've got a child who has a history of being able to focus age appropriately or sit still in an age appropriate way, and then all of a sudden that kind of shifts and they become more, they have more difficulty with focusing or more difficulty with sitting. So then you got to say, okay, look, we've got to look closely at this and find out what's going on. Sometimes what happens is that there's that big jump between second and third grade where, the workload becomes much bigger and the expectations for independent behavior becomes much larger. So you have that jump, and then you have the jump from elementary school to middle school to high school. All those huge developmental jumps oftentimes will knock our kids off balance, and you begin to see things like this. Now, it could be a number of things, so we have to be super careful with that one. But nonetheless, keep an eye out for it. Unexplained weight loss. I mean, goodness gracious, that's immediately over the line. Let's get some medical attention to this. Let's find out what's going on. There may be some psychological support as well. But the idea is that these are issues that need to be dealt with as quickly as possible. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how that can work, because a lot of parents, they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to look for. And so I provide a couple of basic guardrails. First of all, I like to explain to people that kids do not grow up in a vacuum. Kids grow up in a family. So therefore, this issue becomes a family issue. And I also I combine that with the thought that in normal, of course, there's some odd circumstances sometimes, but in most cases, mom and dad or whomever the parent is the most powerful healing source in this child's life. No one. I always tell people, so why do you think if you take your kid to a stranger for an hour a week that somehow they're going to be more powerful than you? And that's, it's kind of provocative to say that, but it's absolutely the truth. And so what happens is if it becomes a family issue, not only are we organizing around the child in a way that's going to be more effective, but we're also going to provide you as the parent with support. Because this is an area where you don't have necessarily a map. And so you've got to have somebody you can look to help you figure out how to reorganize your life and your child's life. So when it comes to someone who understands how to do family therapy, then that changes. It doesn't really matter whether it's a social worker or a psychologist, or even these days some people in some parts of the country as psychiatrists get training in family therapy. The point is, are they skilled at what they do? So really, you get away from what their label is, and you focus more on, okay, who's really good at what they do. And the honest truth is that I get this all day, every day. Or not all day, every day, but I get this very frequently. It's like, how do I find somebody? How do I find somebody good? How do I know they're good? And the most effective way is to check your network. Now, you don't want to scream from the rooftops that you've got issues in your family, but the truth of the matter is most everybody does at some point. And if you start taking a look around and started talking to your friends and say, look, I need to know who's around here that's really good, who's got the great reputation, believe me, that's going to be the most effective way you're going to get support. Because Going to the phone book is like throwing a dot, throwing an arrow or throwing a dart at the wall. You just don't know. You don't have any reference point. You can sometimes go to your pediatrician. They usually have a couple of people that they refer to. Now, pediatricians oftentimes get so busy they're not necessarily aware of everybody in the community. They have their kind of like go-to people. So that would be kind of like second to me. No disrespect to the pediatricians, but they're in their own world. So parents who've had to go and source people like this are the ones that have the information. Now, on this slide, it wasn't just by accident that I put this graphic up, because another super, super important component to this is the keep calm part. Because I don't care how old you are. I don't care how old your kids are. They may act like they're ignoring you, but they're not, especially older teenage kids. But believe me, you are the leader of the home. And so when either you or your spouse or your partner or whomever, if you're calm, they're going to feel that, and that's going to help them feel calmer. That's going to help them feel safer. That's going to give them a sense of hope that we're going to be able to get through this. I can't stress that enough. And I know it's not easy, but you've got to go and put the pieces in place that are going to help you feel calmer, and the child's going to respond to that. And that's just something that is kind of a universal truth. Now, so keep calm, be proactive, and don't wait. Now, sometimes we also have people say, well, don't you kind of have to grow up, with the kind of system that's all, you're just resilient. Some people are, some people aren't. And the truth of the matter is that resilience can be taught, super clear in the research, and it's not a but, it's an and. It takes vigilance, persistence, and compassion. Because, again, this is not an acute event. This is not a singular event. This is something that happens for years and years and years. So that vigilance is key. Persistence is going to be something that it's a really big challenge, and I understand that. It's not simple, but it's doable. So that's what I get next. I say, oh, look, you've got to be persistent. You have to be, you have to be compassionate. They're like, whoa, I'm not perfect. I'm not an expert at this. I have no math. And it's like, well, you know what? You're not alone. It's like Bill Cosby said, anyone who says they're an expert in parenting doesn't have any kids. And that's the truth. I mean, you're blessed with this beautiful being that you have to raise. You make 1,000 decisions every day. Do you expect that every single one of those are going to be right? And when you're presented with a specific challenge, do you think you're just going to wake up one morning and know how to do everything correctly? No. So you've got to be compassionate and understand that you are capable and you're going to make it work. And your child will feel that, and that's part of the healing process. That's why I stop here. I think many of you probably have seen this, but I want to kind of ask you to really take this to heart, because true success is what it looks like on the right. And not many of us have been in a situation where it's a beautiful straight line. So we have to embrace that, and that's where a lot of compassion comes in. And then we just start, right, it's not about getting knocked down, it's about how you get yourself back up. So let's think of this as a process that's going to be, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But you're making progress up and to the right.